census taker once tried to test me. I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti. You fly back to school now, little Starling. Fly.
Hey there, it's Mark. Welcome back to RT Essentials. I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about the movies we'll be discussing today. And look, I'm usually all about horror, whether it's supernatural, your slashers, your found footage, your psychological, you name it, I can handle it, provided the lights are on. It's just that the selections in this list fall more into the category of frightening because they were inspired by true events. Yes, these things actually kind of really happened. Look, a film inspired by true events will take some serious liberties, as opposed to a film based on true events, which more closely follows the reality path. But still, again, you turn the lights off, doesn't make it any less scary. As we discuss these films, we'll also be detailing the real events that influenced them, just to raise the fright factor. And that was the hair on my arm standing up. It's a good, spine-chilling, fun episode of RT Essentials. Here comes the best horror movies inspired by true events. The Exorcist.
If that's true, then you must know my mother's maiden name. What is it? What is it?
The Exorcist was directed by William Friedkin and tells the story of a young girl named Regan who starts exhibiting strange behaviors like speaking in tongues and levitating. You know, kid stuff. Her worried mother seeks medical help but hits a dead end, leaving her no other option but to turn to a local priest, Father Damien Karras. Father Karras makes a request to perform an exorcism on Regan, who he believes has been seized by the devil, and with the help of an older, experienced Catholic priest, Father Marin, the two perform the daunting, demon-ridding ritual. Everything about this movie is terrifying. The performances, the off-putting music, the special effects, Regan doing a spider crawl down the staircase while spewing blood, but the real-life story that influenced The Exorcist is even more terrifying. Regan's character was inspired by a young boy known as Ronald. I see what you did there. Who went through dozens of exorcisms in the late 1940s after a series of disturbing events. Ronald's bed would suddenly shake, he'd hear strange scratching sounds coming from the walls and basement, and foul smells would fill his room. Much like the movie, Ronald's family turned to two Catholic priests who were granted permission to perform the exorcisms, and much like the movie, inexplicable events transpired during the rite, such as objects mysteriously flying across the room, strange scratches appearing on Ronald's body. The priest detailed these real-life events as they took place, and their notes served as the basis for author William Peter Blatty's best-selling novel of the same name. Blatty would eventually adapt his own novel into the Oscar-winning screenplay for The Exorcist.
Begone! In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, by this sign of the Holy Cross of our Lord Jesus Christ, who lives and reigns with the Father and the Holy Spirit. Damien!
This film is widely considered to be the scariest movie ever by movie lovers, pundits, experts, and the guy talking right now. And when we adjust for inflation, it's still the highest grossing R-rated movie of all time. I mean, you talk about casting a shadow that's very creepy, very long, very dark, and tends to spin its head. That's what The Exorcist has done. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Writer-director Tobe Hooper marketed the Texas Chainsaw Massacre as being based on true events, a tactic that helped attract a wider audience and further added to the hysteria surrounding the film's release. The movie follows Sally and her paraplegic brother Franklin as they set out to investigate the vandalization of their grandfather's grave. Sally, Franklin, and some friends stop at their family's old farmhouse, I know where this is going, and soon discover that a group of crazed, murderous outcasts are living next door. One by one, Sally and company are attacked by the chainsaw-wielding Leatherface, who sports a mask made, it's not actually leather, it's human skin. Naturally, this film left a lot of people skeptical of their neighbors and certainly helped to establish the creepy farmhouse horror trope. Hooper's marketing ploy left many viewers convinced that the film's contents were rooted in reality, but the Texas Chainsaw Massacre was only inspired by true events, like the murders committed by Elmer Wayne Henley and Dean Corll in Texas, and the accounts of one serial killer in particular named Ed Gein, also known as the Butcher of Plainfield. Gein's crimes were widely publicized in the 1950s after authorities discovered that he'd been exhuming corpses and using their bones and skin to create masks and other horrifying objects. In addition to Leatherface, Gein inspired many other characters in film and television, such as Norman Bates from Psycho and Buffalo Bill from Silence of the Lambs. More on him later. But the idea to have Leatherface's weapon of choice be a chainsaw was not inspired by Gein, and actually came to Hooper while he was Christmas shopping in a crowded hardware store. It is the season. A Nightmare on Elm Street.
Come to Freddy.
A Nightmare on Elm Street was the first installment in the hugely successful franchise that now consists of 9 films. And at the core of this franchise is one of the most iconic horror characters ever created, the fedora-wearing, metal-clawed, joke-cracking Freddy Krueger. Krueger consistently ranks as one of the greatest villains in cinematic history, but most people aren't familiar with Wes Craven's inspiration for the character in film. In the late 1990s, Craven spoke of reading a newspaper article about a young immigrant who had fled to the United States during the Cambodian Civil War and was complaining to his parents about having nightmares. He was so scared of these nightmares that he did everything he could to avoid falling asleep, including keeping a coffee pot in his room. One night while watching TV downstairs, he passed out, so his parents carried him up to his room and felt relieved that he was finally getting some rest. An hour later, they heard screams and rushed to the boy's bedroom, only to find him dead. This form of psychological terror was classified as sudden, unexplained nocturnal death syndrome, and many of the young men that fled Southeast Asia during that period experienced some form of this. So Craven took this story and combined it with his own experience of being bullied in school by a boy named, you guessed it, Fred Krueger, and this classic slasher film about a midnight mangler who preys on teenagers in their dreams was born. If nothing else, what a great PSA for anti-bullying. The Amityville Horror.
Next is the master bedroom.
The Amityville Horror was directed by Stuart Rosenberg and is based on the 1977 Jay Anson book of the same name. It follows the Lutz family, who are terrorized by supernatural forces after moving into a new house in New York State, which also happens to be the site of a recent mass killing. But hey, location, location, location. It's a good deal. You gotta close it. When the house is suddenly swarmed with flies and pipes start oozing slime and blood, the Lutz call on a local priest to exorcise the evil spirits inhabiting the home. Anson's book was based on the experiences of the real Lutz family, who claimed that a malevolent force in their newly purchased home would cause them to suddenly levitate, and objects would fly across the room. They'd even sometimes see glowing red eyes. The Lutz family was so freaked out that they fled the home in the middle of the night, only weeks after moving in. Because the book and film were based on the account of the real family, and the house was indeed the real location of a violent murder, many believe the story to be true. But since its release, several people have come forward to rebut the original claims of the Lutz family, including the priest who blessed the home and the later owners of the house, who could not substantiate the damage claims that were described in the book. Look, true or not, the Amityville Horror became one of the highest grossing independent films ever and spawned a commercially successful franchise, and it still lives rent-free in my head. The Conjuring.
do it.
Set in the early 1970s, The Conjuring follows paranormal investigators Lorraine and Ed Warren, who are summoned to the home of Carolyn and Roger Perron after a supernatural presence has made itself known. The Perrons and their 5 daughters have recently moved into this secluded farmhouse, and as I'm sure you've deduced, things escalate in a horrifying fashion. I'm getting serious Amityville vibes here. In fact, Lorraine and Ed were a real couple who also consulted on that case. The Conjuring was inspired by the real Perron family who, after moving into their dream home in Harrisville, Rhode Island, started noticing spirits, some that grew increasingly ornery. Carolyn Perron researched the history of the home and discovered that it had been in the same family for many generations, and several family members that had lived there had died under horrifying circumstances, like drowning in the creek behind the home. One member was murdered, and a few hanged themselves in the attic.
Chefs interpectoribus. Ed, divinity. Ed! Stop it!
Understand this? We are now fighting for her soul!
In the name of Jesus Christ, the saints and all the angels, I command you to reveal yourself!
One spirit that was depicted in the film, Bathsheba, was considered the most evil of them all. According to the real Andrea Perron, the eldest of the 5 Perron daughters, Bathsheba perceived herself to be the mistress of the house, and she resented the competition that her mother Carolyn posed for that position. Further investigations into the home's history revealed that a real person named Bathsheba did in fact live there in the mid-1800s, and she was believed to be a, drumroll please, Satanist. Though Andrea Perron has admitted that the film took some liberties, Lorraine Warren insists that the hauntings were real and that all the events depicted actually happened. Open Water.
Oh, Jesus Christ! I thought he said he'd never come that close.
They also said the boat would be here.
Next up, we're taking a little break from the ghost-infested homes to discuss Open Water, the tale of Daniel and Susan, an American couple who embark on a tropical vacay ready for some serious scuba action. While on a group dive, they get left behind thanks to an incorrect head count. You had one job, count the heads, it's all you had to do. When Daniel and Susan resurface, they realize their boat has departed, and now they must survive the open waters with hungry sharks lurking just beneath them. The story was loosely based on a real married couple, Thomas and Eileen Lonergan, who were unintentionally abandoned while diving off the coast of Australia in 1998. Their absence went unnoticed for 2 days and was only realized when their belongings were discovered on the dive boat. A massive air and sea search ensued over the next few days, but neither Eileen or Thomas were ever found and are presumed dead.
Are you okay? Are you
I don't know.
Daniel!
Oh my God!
Oh my God! Honey! Oh my God!
Forgive me! Yes!
I'm gonna go look! I'm gonna go look!
No! Let's see if I can get...
No!
Obviously, there's no way of knowing exactly what happened to Thomas or Eileen in their final moments, so the film was forced to take some serious liberties, like making shark attacks the driving mechanism of fear. But most theories suggest that the couple had succumbed to dehydration and inevitably drowned, as opposed to being eaten by very famous cinematic animals. Open Water was a box office success and received mostly positive reviews, with many hailing it as a welcome addition to the somewhat oversaturated shark movie market. And if you're wondering how director Chris Kentis made the sharks in the film look so realistic, it's because they're real sharks. Yeah, take that, Bruce. Poltergeist. And just like that, we're back to possessed homes. Poltergeist was directed by Tobe Hooper, Remember? The Texas Chainsaw Massacre guy, the one who really hates Christmas shopping? Yeah, so this story was created by Steven Spielberg, who also co-wrote the script, and it focuses on the strange happenings that unfold at the Freelings family home. When ghosts start communicating through the TV set, and the friendly and playful spirits within the house get angry and abduct the youngest daughter, Carol, the Freelings must turn to a parapsychologist and eventually an exorcist for help. Spielberg originally intended for this film to be a sequel to Close Encounters of the Third Kind, but Hooper insisted they lean into the horror genre and they made it a ghost movie. But the story didn't just appear in a mound of mashed potatoes, it was based on the real tale of James and Lucille Herman from Long Island, New York, who reported strange activities such as bottle caps mysteriously popping off and bookshelves tipping over on their own. When authorities ruled out possible electrical disturbances, the Hermans were left with no other option but to ring a priest. Coincidentally, the Herman home was only 7 miles from the Amityville Horror House. You cannot make this stuff up. And they literally didn't. Many consider Poltergeist to be a cursed movie due to the real-life tragedies surrounding several of the cast members, such as actress Heather O'Rourke, who played Carol and died from health complications at the age of 12, and Dominic Dunn, who played Dana and was murdered by her ex-boyfriend at the age of 22. Cursed or not, there's no denying that Poltergeist is one of the scariest films ever made, and I will never again have a clown in my bedroom. Scream. Scream was inspired by American serial killer Danny Rolling, aka the Gainesville Ripper. Rolling murdered 5 college students in Gainesville, Florida over a 4-day period in August of 1990 and later confessed to committing a triple homicide in his home city of Shreveport, Louisiana. The Gainesville Ripper was featured on an episode of Turning Point, which aspiring screenwriter-actor Kevin Williamson happened to catch while he was house-sitting in Los Angeles. Williamson started to panic. The combination of the eerie TV special, being alone in a strange home, and then realizing that he had left a window open was too much for him to handle. Did he put Jiffy Pop on that night? Well, he grabbed a kitchen knife just to be safe and began checking the house, and then, instead of running out the front door, he called a friend. So the friend started mocking Williamson by bringing up horror movies, and the two soon began discussing their favorite films in that genre. So just like that, the idea for Scream was conceived. As soon as Williamson hung up the phone, he penned an 18-page treatment that served as the iconic opening sequence of the film.
Sex equals death, okay? Number 2, you can never drink or do drugs. No, the sin factor. It's a sin. It's an extension of number 1. And number 3, never, ever, ever, under any circumstances say, I'll be right back. Because you won't be back.
I'm getting another beer. You want one?
Yeah, sure.
I'll be right back.
When we adjust for inflation, Scream is the highest-grossing slasher film of all time, and it wouldn't exist if Williamson hadn't caught that one TV special on that one fateful night, made a fateful phone call, and I'm gonna go ahead and say, cooked a fateful batch of Jiffy Pop. Wolf Creek.
You get to, like, cruise around the bush, saying cool stuff like, that's not a knife. This is a knife. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah.
Wolf Creek was directed and written by Greg McLean and follows 3 backpacker friends whose rickety car breaks down when you just don't want a car to break down. You see, they're stopped at Wolf Creek National Park in Western Australia. A mysterious bushman named Mick Taylor finds the group of friends and offers to tow them to his camp and repair their car. Wow, what a generous guy. I don't know about you, but Mick seems like someone you can count on. Oh, wait, he takes everyone captive and starts torturing and killing them like clockwork? Yep, that was my other guess.
Hey, like your little mate said before,
That's not a knife. This is a knife.
McClane was inspired by serial killer Ivan Milat, known as the Backpacker Murderer, who infamously captured, robbed, and murdered 2 men and 5 women in New South Wales between 1989 and 1992. McClane had originally drafted a straightforward slasher film, but ended up rewriting it after seeing media on Milat's killing. He wanted to create a villain that blended the archetypal Australian outbacker with more sadistic national figures. According to McClane, the film was meant to portray what it would be like to be stuck in an incredibly isolated place with the most evil character you can possibly imagine, who is also distinctly Australian. Well, McClane, if that was your intention, I'd say good on you, mate. The Silence of the Lambs.
You still wake up sometimes, don't you? You wake up in the dark and hear the screaming of the lambs.
Yes.
And you think if you save poor Catherine, you could make them stop, don't you? You think if Catherine lives, you won't wake up in the dark ever again to that awful screaming of the lambs.
Last but certainly not least is The Silence of the Lambs, directed by Jonathan Demme and written by Ted Towie. Adapted from the 1988 novel of the same name, the film stars Jodie Foster as Clarice Starling, a top student at the FBI's training academy. Starling is tasked with interviewing Dr. Hannibal Lecter, a brilliant psychiatrist who also happens to be a violent psychopath and is serving life behind bars for various acts of murder and, you guessed it, cannibalism. Starling and Lecter form a curious bond, and Lecter becomes instrumental in hunting down another murderous menace, Buffalo Bill. So as I mentioned earlier when discussing Leatherface, Ed Gein's creepy obsession with human skin had an influence on the characters in this movie. But Buffalo Bill actually shares similarities with a combination of serial killers that, in addition to Gein, included Ted Bundy, Jerry Brudos, and Gary Heidman. Each of these killers had specific methods for luring, torturing, and murdering their victims. Additionally, the relationship between Starling and Lecter was influenced by the real-life interviews conducted between FBI agents and Ted Bundy in attempts to help them capture the Green River Killer. The FBI fully cooperated in the production of this film and saw it as a useful tool for recruiting more female agents. Silence of the Lambs is the only horror film to ever win the Oscar for Best Picture and is one of only 3 films to ever win all 5 major Academy Awards. If you haven't seen this one, I'd highly recommend trading out the popcorn for some fava beans and a nice Chianti. And that wraps up our list of the best horror movies inspired by true events. Of course, countless films have taken inspiration from the real world, but there just isn't enough time to discuss them all, so if we missed one, don't fret, we got lots of episodes of RT Essentials coming your way, so we will get there eventually. Thanks for tuning in, I'm Mark Ellis, and I'll be right back. Oh no, I just did it to myself.